Somehow it feels like setting fire to tents has become my specialty.
Enkrid thought so while leaning against a tree, briefly explaining the plan. None of the squad members added any comments and just listened. By now, it was as if the arrow had already been shot. After that, Enkrid moved.
I'll go first.
He stepped very quietly, not making a sound. Later, he lowered his posture and eventually lay flat on the ground and crawled. All the squad members watched Enkrid crawl on the ground. The plan he had instructed was simple. A straightforward trick of shouting from the east and attacking from the west. The ones shouting were Mac and the rest of the squad members. Only 3 were excluded from the shouting group: Enkrid, Andrew, and a soldier with a thug background.
I'll do it.
Mac volunteered to take on the role of drawing the soldiers' attention. No complaints, he spoke up readily. Though Mac's attitude suddenly changed, Enkrid didn't think much of it. If he listens well, that's good enough. In the darkness, Mac stretched his body quietly, picked up a stone and threw it hard. The flying stone hit the soldier's head. The stone bounced off the helmet, and the soldier who was hit screamed in pain.
Bon damn it, what the hell?
The 4 soldiers on guard turned in one direction. Enkrid held his breath and watched them. No words were needed.
Intruder.
A soldier shouted. The commotion started. Enkrid took advantage of the timing and tried to move close to the tent.
You little rat.
He got caught. There was no need to panic. He had learned from several experiences today.
You can't do it alone.
Next to the tent, a soldier holding a spear glared at him. Before the opponent could rush at him, Enkrid stood up. The dirt on his chest fell to the ground. Without even a shout, the soldier braced himself against a torch and thrust the spear. Enkrid, watching the flying spear to the end, twisted his body to dodge it. No, he didn't just dodge. He took a gamble, betting nearly half his life. The heart of the beast gave him the audacity to attempt such a crazy move. He dodged and moved forward. The spear blade grazed his shoulder. He barely avoided it. A burning heat radiated from his shoulder. Instead, Enkrid managed to get right in front of the enemy. As he gained distance, he slashed his sword upward. The enemy soldier, realizing the danger, lowered his spear to block it like a shield. And Enkrid, who had been hiding a knife in his left hand from the beginning, stabbed it toward the enemy's collarbone. The blade pierced through both bone and flesh. The enemy soldier groaned. Enkrid then headbutted the soldier's nose. The struck soldier couldn't even groan and fell backward. It was a Valen mercenary sword technique, the 3-sword style. The first sword was a feint. The real attack was with the knife in the left hand and a headbutt. He had taken the gamble and rushed toward the spear. For this, he took down the enemy soldier, but since he had already been discovered, setting the tent on fire was now a distant hope. Another soldier appeared behind the fallen one, holding a torch and a sword. The man with a scar near his eyes looked formidable. You could tell just from his gait and demeanor, he wasn't an amateur.
Pathetic.
He hissed through his teeth and spoke. There was a sense of confidence in his steps as he walked. He saw an attacker emerge from the darkness, yet showed no sign of fear.
This is taking too long.
Enkrid muttered. The man frowned at those words. It was behind the man. Flames were rising. The tent had somehow caught fire.
Put it out.
The man shouted. Watching this, Enkrid rushed forward and stabbed with his sword. He pushed off with his right foot and stepped firmly with his left.
Everything starts from the feet.
This was the basic principle of swordsmanship that Rem and Ragna always spoke of. Enkrid followed it. From the feet, he kicked off the ground and moved forward. The soldier holding the sword and torch grew larger in his vision. He was looking back. His entire stance was full of openings. Enkrid thrust his sword. It was a thrust powered by the momentum of his entire body, the same thrust that had killed Enkrid countless times before. The blade cut through the air and reached its target. It happened in an instant. Among all the thrusts he had performed countless times, this was the best. Even compared to all the repeated toe days, Enkrid thought he had killed his opponent. To the focused Enkrid, everything seemed to move in slow motion. Everything slowed down. His sword, the man's hand. In this slowed world, the enemy soldier's hand twitched. Soon the enemy's sword shot up from below. Enkrid moved past the man, almost bouncing to the side, and stopped, clutching his stomach. The enemy soldier, who had been looking back, turned to face forward again. He looked at Enkrid and raised his eyebrows.
You arrogant bastard.
The enemy seemed extremely angry. Of course, the anger itself was no problem. The problem was his astonishing swordsmanship.
In that moment,
The thrust was perfect, satisfyingly so. Even Rem wouldn't have been able to block it unless he had his whip-like axe. But he dodged it. Though it left a slight scratch on his neck, it was hardly a serious injury, more like a mere graze. On the other hand, the sword the enemy reflexively swung upward had precisely grazed Enkrid's side. It wasn't a deep wound. No bones were damaged. It wasn't fatal, but still,
I was careless.
yet this was the result. Moreover, how familiar was this today to Enkrid? And still, it felt as if a great river lay between the enemy soldier and himself. The enemy could cross the river and stab or slash him at any time. But Enkrid felt like merely dipping his foot in the water was the best he could do. There was a clear difference in skill between them. So what could he do? When had he ever only fought against weaker opponents? Enkrid steadied his breathing and gripped his sword tightly. If this was the turning point of today, he would simply do his best. The skill gap felt overwhelming, but that didn't change anything. While others might feel this overwhelming gap as despair and a cliff, Enkrid felt it as a staircase. A staircase he could climb one day. A thrilling excitement filled him from his toes to his chest. Behold, how could repeating today be a curse? After surpassing so many todays, he would eventually defeat this formidable opponent. He would definitely do it. He would never settle for today. Therefore, the exhilaration filled him. Enkrid's feelings showed on his face.
Are you smiling?
The enemy soldier's face twisted. If Enkrid was filled with exhilaration, the enemy's face showed anger.
I'll tear you apart and feed you to the dogs.
Enkrid sensed death. An opponent he couldn't win against right now, no matter what he did. But that didn't mean he would just take it quietly. He braced himself for pain. He wouldn't back down, just as he gripped his sword and steadied his mind. Flames soared behind the man. The earlier fire seemed like a joke, as if a dragon was spewing fire. The entire tent caught fire. Sparks flew everywhere with a crackling sound. Desperate voices could be heard beyond the flames rising from the tent.
These bastards. Put out the fire. Someone poured oil on it, Commander. The torch stand has fallen.
Wow, they're doing a great job. Enkrid had drawn attention twice to set this tent on fire, once with Mac and the squad members. Another time, he did it himself. The fire was started by Andrew and the squad member with a thug background. The thug background squad member was showcasing his troublemaking skills from the city here.
The flagpole is burning.
Then a man shouted as he watched the flames rise right next to the tent. He was a man with a strange tattoo on his face.
Commander, do you not understand what's important right now?
He scolded the man in front of Enkrid. Seeing this, Enkrid quietly stepped back. No matter how much his skills were inferior, he wouldn't die from just 1 or 2 strikes. The opponent knew that too. If he stood his ground, he could hold out until the flames consumed the tent and the flagpole inside it. Frankly, Enkrid couldn't understand why they were risking their lives for a few flagpoles. He knew only one thing: the opponent valued it greatly. Much more than the lives of a few soldiers.
You just wait.
The opponent, the commander of the Aspen unit, glared at Enkrid before turning around sharply. He decided that dealing with the people setting the fire behind him was more urgent than facing Enkrid. Enkrid sighed in relief inwardly. He felt like he had just narrowly escaped death. No matter how many times he experienced it by repeating today, he could never get used to dying. That, too, was a curse if it could be called one. Having to repeatedly endure that terrible moment. Of course, the suffering from facing all that pain and death was not a major issue for Enkrid, if it allowed him to move forward, if it improved his skills. Why couldn't he endure it?
We need to go.
As he kept watch around him, he heard Andrew's voice from behind. He glanced back and saw Andrew's face covered in soot.
We're retreating.
Enkrid said, starting to move. The thug background soldier followed behind him. As they ran, Andrew pulled a whistle from his chest and blew it, tweet, tweet. 2 long blasts, and in the distance Mac came running with the remaining squad members. Henry was bleeding from his arm, and there were no other soldiers following behind Mac. The squad, which originally had 10 members, was now halved, and the escape route Enkrid wanted had opened up.
The enemy is busy, no large-scale pursuit, right?
It seemed Mac was asking if this was Enkrid's plan. His forehead was also cut, proving that he too had faced difficulties. Blood was flowing from the wound.
Probably.
Enkrid responded and kept moving. Blood continued to flow from his side as well. He had thought the wound wasn't deep, but without any chance to stop the bleeding, it just kept flowing. There was nothing to do at the moment but press down with his hand and keep running. From now on, it was an unknown today, so Enkrid kept an eye on their rear. The enemy was pursuing them. 5 of them were chasing.
These crazy bastards.
They were relatively unscathed. Their faces were smudged with soot, but they had no injuries. The 5 were enough for Enkrid, Andrew, and Mac. Henry had a hole in his stomach and was staggering, likely due to the blood loss from his abdomen. The thug background squad member was helping him and couldn't fight properly.
Damn it, we'll all die like this. Get a grip.
The thug background soldier scolded Henry but didn't abandon him. In fighting the pursuit team, Enkrid's side wound opened further, but it wasn't fatal. Mac had killed 2 of the pursuing soldiers but got a cut on his thigh. He took out a linen bandage, wrapped it up, and kept pace without falling behind. Andrew seemed to have significantly improved his skills after just a few battles.
No, that's not it.
Enkrid realized that Andrew hasn't suddenly improved his skills. It was more accurate to say that his original skills had emerged through intense battlefield experience. If Andrew's sword hadn't fiercely cut down 2 of the pursuing soldiers in an instant, their escape might have failed, or at least been much harder. Blood was seeping again from the wound Andrew had initially received on his cheek. Everyone was battered, but they weren't dead yet. As they kept heading in a direction all night, Henry spoke in a near-death voice.
If we go west from here, we'll reach the plains where foxes and snakes live. They won't be able to follow us easily there.
This plain, known as Green Pearl, was home to various animals. Among them were foxes and snakes. While the foxes were one thing, the snakes, many of which were venomous, posed a danger.
If we go there, we might shake off the enemy, but we'll get bitten by the snakes first.
Max said. Henry responded with a faint smile.
There's a place where the habitats of the foxes and snakes overlap. I know the way. It's safe there since it's the border of their territories. It's a hunter's path.
Enkrid looked at Henry, thinking it was impressive he could smile despite being so pale. Guiding them in such a state showed exceptional mental strength. Everyone looked at Enkrid. The decision was his to make.
That way.
Enkrid said and moved. There was no hesitation as he walked. He pondered.
A man I've never seen before.
The enemy commander had left a deep impression on Enkrid. If that commander had appeared every time, Enkrid would have been too busy dying. But it was the first time. Perhaps he showed up because they had been pushed to this situation.
Or maybe not.
Now that he thought about it, he seemed to have heard that voice before. It was when he had sneaked into the burning barracks after several repeated tow days. When he barely managed to enter the barracks guarded by enemy soldiers, Enkrid saw a strange sight. Flagpoles and flags, a bowl emitting strange smoke, and a man with tattoos all over his face. It looked like he was performing some kind of ritual, but the man's reaction was too intense.
Catch him.
When Enkrid kicked over the flagpole, the man was horrified. That was when Enkrid realized. These flagpoles were something important to them. And then there was someone who slashed his neck from behind.
Who is this bastard?
Now that he thought about it, it seemed like the same person as the owner of that voice. Lost in thought, Enkrid continued walking, guided by Henry, as the surroundings began to turn blue. A blue light enveloped the surroundings from top to bottom, signaling the start of a new day. It was dawn. The sun was starting to rise. Enkrid realized he had survived another today. As the sun rose and the surroundings brightened, Enkrid's scout team finally met up with the main force.
What happened to you guys?
As soon as they met, the scout platoon leader asked.
What happened to you guys?
Enkrid had more urgent matters than explaining. There were too many injured people. Reporting could wait until they were on their way back. For now, it was enough that they were alive.
Phew, I'm about to pass out now.
Henry said from behind. Enkrid didn't reply. There was no point in speaking to someone who had already passed out.
How's the flagpole?
It's fine.
The company commander of the Aspen Duchy wasn't too pleased with the current operation. But what could a mere commander do about orders from higher-ups? When ordered, you follow. So, He was following orders, and a minor problem arose in the midst of it. A few rat-like creatures from Naurilia infiltrated the camp and set it on fire. Even though more than half of the troops were ambushed in the tall grass, the infiltration was allowed. No matter how much he disliked it, the operation had already begun. Suffering here was a matter of pride. Failure was even less acceptable.
You should have been more thorough with the defenses.
The owner of the flagpole said. His words made the company commander's forehead veins bulge. He found it annoying that this guy, who could be killed with a single sword stroke, was talking. But what could he do? It was true that there was a breach in the unit's defense.
Indeed.
The company commander said this and shoved the tent's door open as he stepped outside. He couldn't understand the situation.
Does this make any sense?
The enemy detecting this place? Sure, let's say they could. But what about after that? With less than 10 people, they bypassed the troops hidden in the tall grass and attacked the main unit's flagpole. The company commander believed in his unit. Of course he did. He was often nicknamed the Demon Commander. It was a nickname earned from his harsh training methods. His philosophy was that one must spit blood during training to avoid spitting blood and dying on the battlefield. It was a unit he had trained himself.
They managed to break through this.
There are soldiers who lose in battle, but none who fail in guarding. The company commander genuinely believed this, so should he blame his allies for their defense? He couldn't do that recklessly. The ones who planned and executed this were not ordinary. They had the courage to infiltrate enemy territory with a small number, the skill to survive a confrontation with his company commander, and the perfect finish of setting the fire and escaping. Even if the company commander had to let them go because the fire spread behind him.
Luck is also a skill.
The company commander of Aspen, who had roamed the battlefield for a long time, also knew the importance of luck. The commander spoke to the waiting lieutenant.
Call all the commanders except for the platoon leader on duty. Yes, sir.
His company was under the battalion, but it had its own operational authority. In other words, it was an independent company, and usually independent companies had nicknames. The name of this unit was Greyhound. In the Duchy of Aspen, a greyhound was a dog with grey fur, known for its persistent nature. A greyhound had to be connected to its chosen target, no matter what, whether it was for love or for a fight. Because of this, the Greyhound unit was also called the Tenacious Lovers. Now, the commander of that unit had set his sights on an enemy scout squad leader, whose name he didn't even know.
I will catch and kill him for sure.
The Greyhound, the grey-furred dog, had chosen its target. The commander repeatedly etched this resolve into his heart. He would definitely catch and punish him. Above his head, inside the tent, clouds started to gather. Perhaps due to the work of the shaman present, it looked like it was going to rain soon. The recent occasional rain was mostly the work of the shaman inside the tent, and this shaman was the key to the current tactics. He still didn't like it, but there was no denying that this was an efficient operation. If this operation had been nonsense, the independent company Greyhound or the Tenacious Lovers would never have participated, no matter what. A battlefield where victory was promised. Apart from his burning desire for revenge, he found it extremely uninteresting.
By chance, you discovered the enemy's ambush. By chance, you infiltrated their main camp. And by chance, you set their camp on fire.
Saying it like this does sound strange. Instead of nodding, Enkrid added a footnote.
Yes, I thought it was the appropriate action at the moment, and it happened by chance.
The scout platoon leader blinked. What was this guy saying right now? A guy who was about his age and became a squad leader by luck. A fool who swung his sword at every chance despite his poor skills. That was the general assessment of the troublemaker squad leader. But listening to what he did now, this is something else. Even hearing it from Enkrid, it sounds like this. The story from the surviving squad members was even more ridiculous.
Rumors can't be trusted. If possible, I'd like to learn more from you.
Andrew, who used to be so arrogant that it was worrisome before he left, there was concern that something might happen to him if he was sent off like that. He had his command of the scout team taken away forcibly, and now he says it was natural. No, he wants to learn more. Is this really the Andrew I knew?
In terms of skills, I'd say he's above the level of an intermediate soldier.
Next was Mac, Andrew's mentor. The scout platoon leader knew Mac's skills. Half of the reason he entrusted Andrew with the scout team was because he believed in Mac, and now Mac acknowledged him. With skills, no less.
He knows a lot. I just did as he instructed, and this happened.
The last was Henry, the Plains hunter. The squad members' evaluations were unanimous. They just trusted and followed him. They all couldn't be lying together. So this actually happened. Enkrid took over the command of the scout team. With just 10 men, he evaded the eyes of the enemy troops ambushed in the tall grass, set the enemy camp on fire, and returned alive.
Does this make any sense?
It doesn't seem possible, but since he set the fire and gathered intel on the enemy's movements, there's nothing more to say. Trying to piece together everything he heard was bewildering. He stood still among the enemy, and they avoided him on their own. He moved through enemy territory in the dark without being caught by anyone.
Well, you must have been extremely lucky.
In the end, the scout platoon leader couldn't say anything else. Enkrid thought that was an appropriate statement. He couldn't say he memorized the enemy's movements and the state of their camp because of the endlessly repeating day.
Yes, luck was on my side.
If this was luck, it was extraordinary luck. It was like the goddess of luck had done more than kiss him. She had spent the night with him. But apart from luck, there was no other way to explain it. There was nothing particularly secretive about it, so rumors started to spread within the scout platoon. Enkrid, the troublemaker squad leader, was a man of luck, a man who the goddess of luck had entrusted with a coin, luck itself, or that he had used up all his lifetime's luck on this scouting mission. The return to the main camp was uneventful. During the half-day walk, it only drizzled for a short while. Rain fell from a clear sky. It was rare but not unheard of, and all the way back, Enkrid was preoccupied with one thought.
Was that the best I could do?
It was a question he asked himself. If he had repeated today a few more times, could he have achieved a different result? Regret lingers in everything. Enkrid had realized this since he was young. What mattered were the choices and the process of making those choices.
I thought it was the best I could do.
Being able to repeat today brought different thoughts. He wondered if it was indeed the best choice, feeling doubt and regret, questioning if there were other options.
Only 4.
That was the number who returned alive, including himself. That made 5. Half of his unit has died. The results questioned Enkrid. Was this the best he could do? Was there no other way?
5 died.
Those 5 were neither Enkrid's family nor friends. They were merely comrades who shared a short mission. Their presence or absence wouldn't change anything. At that moment, on that day, they were simply Enkrid's responsibility. The dream he had harbored in his heart for a long time, the conviction that had guided him straight till now, reprimanded him. Was that really the best he could do? Couldn't he have protected them better?
What kind of knight do you aspire to be?
Young Enkrid was captivated by the mere notion of being a knight. The boy enchanted by the songs of minstrels about knights had grown into an adult. Over time, Enkrid realized he possessed mediocre talent. Rolling through battlefields, he recognized his limits. Yet he never abandoned his dream, even if that dream had become worn and tattered leather, even if it had turned into a piece of cloth torn and shredded by the sword of reality. He never gave up. Thus, he wasn't just someone who remained enchanted by the mere title of knight. A knight is a protector. A knight is someone who steps forward. A knight is someone who acts on their convictions.
What kind of knight do I want to be?
By repeating today, Enkrid could step beyond his limits. Therefore, he had to uphold the things he had seen, heard, realized, and established through his eyes and ears.
What kind of knight do I want to be?
His torn and shredded dream turned into the word conviction, reprimanded him. Enkrid accepted that reprimand. By doing so, he decided to let go of what had already passed. Even if he could have saved 5 more by repeating today, it was now beyond his control. That today had already ended. Clinging to it was foolish.
The main camp.
One of the soldiers walking with him said,
Phew, we made it.
From the back, Henry, who was being supported, muttered,
So are you going to rush to that flower shop widow as soon as we return?
We can only go once this battle is over, right?
At Enkrid's words, Henry responded with a joyful face. The joy of having survived, of making it through the ordeal alive, filled his heart. The same was true for everyone else, especially for the ex-thug soldier. He kept ruminating over the events that had transpired on the way back. How had he managed to survive? He thought he would live and die like a thug, but somehow he ended up joining the army, and somehow he came to serve under Andrew. And then there was this scouting mission. He had learned a lot from it. The ex-thug soldier, limping on his injured leg, approached Enkrid. It wasn't intentional, but he hadn't spoken a word to him the entire way back.
If you don't repay kindness, you're not a man.
That was something his older brother, who had taken him in when he was young, used to say. That brother was long dead, but the words he had said had become a guiding principle in his life. Even if he had lived a rough life, the ex-thug knew to repay kindness.
I'm sorry for my rudeness. I will repay the favor of saving my life if I get the chance.
Enkrid looked at the soldier who suddenly approached and spoke, then nodded. Did he really save his life? In truth, it was a situation where he could have died, and surviving was due to the soldier's own luck. In fact, repeating today, this soldier had died many times. It was just that on that day, at that moment, the goddess of luck had briefly stayed with him.
Do as you wish.
He answered indifferently and turned around, seeing Andrew and Mac next.
I owe you.
Mac spoke first, his gaze unusually friendly. Andrew was even more so.
I'd like to see you again sometime.
He had thought of him as an endlessly arrogant kid, but his attitude had changed. His eyes had become respectful. Enkrid pressed his palm gently against his aching side and spoke.
If we're on the same battlefield, we'll see each other again. The flower of the battlefield is the infantry.
He used the infantry's motto as a farewell. The scout platoon leader, who had been watching from the side, approached.
You may all return. The wounded should visit the medical tent for treatment. You've all done well, and well, never mind.
The scout platoon leader almost mentioned rewards and recognition to Enkrid before stopping himself.
Report first.
They had done something almost unbelievable. He wasn't sure if the higher-ups would even believe it. So talking about this now seemed premature.
All right then.
Feeling the pain in his side subside quickly, Enkrid decided he didn't need treatment and started walking. It was time to return.
Hope nothing happened.
He hadn't had time to think about this in the tall grass. But now that he was returning to the camp, he wondered if his squad had behaved. Maybe they had gotten into fights with other soldiers. Or perhaps they had been fighting among themselves. Whatever the case, it seemed like something might have happened. There was a reason his squad was called troublemakers. He hadn't even reached the barracks when the sound of metal striking metal hit his ears. His hearing, trained through Jackson, immediately pinpointed the source. It was coming from the main barracks. Enkrid quickened his pace. As he approached the barracks, he saw people gathered around. At the center were two figures with weapons locked, in front of the troublemakers' barracks. The one holding the axe was Rem. The one with the sword was Ragnar. The company commander's emerald green eyes showed confusion as he listened to the scout platoon leader's report.
With just 10 men.
Everything that happened during the scouting mission of the other squad was ordinary. The only notable event was encountering an Aspen infantry scout team on the plains and parting ways without a fight. Naturally, Aspen would also operate scout teams, so encountering them on the plains wasn't unusual. In fact, it was more unusual to have only encountered them once. However, what the Enkrid squad did was entirely different. The enemy was ambushed in the tall grass. The enemy was up to something. It's understandable to gather intelligence. But to infiltrate the enemy camp and set fire to it with just 10 soldiers?
What the hell?
At the center of all this was Enkrid, just like the previous assassin incident. Wasn't the squad leader Enkrid always involved in these peculiar situations? Could it be sheer bad luck? But for that, he had a strange resilience to bad luck. Not just being there, but repeatedly making notable achievements. His skills were mediocre, yet the outcomes of his actions were consistently beyond expectations. Didn't the squad leader endure during the assassin incident? Protecting the target? What he did this time was even more impressive. Infiltrating the enemy camp and gathering intelligence was worthy of countless awards.
Yes, that's what happened.
The scout platoon leader replied. Of the 10 who infiltrated the enemy camp, only 5 died, and the remaining 5 returned with incredible achievements. They weren't elite troops raised by the Cyprus Division, but a scouting team led by the lowest-ranking soldiers. But the company commander was intrigued.
Enkrid.
What the hell is this guy? His skills are mediocre, yet how does he manage this? It wasn't something to ponder deeply.
Luck.
She thought it was just luck. If it wasn't luck, what could it be? Unless he had memorized the entire position of the enemy forces, as if he had entered the enemy commander's mind, that made even less sense. The hypothesis that he might be a spy nurtured by the Aspen Principality seemed more plausible, but that was equally nonsensical. What kind of fool would send such a spy, a mere squad leader with poor skills?
Do you want to call the squad leader and confirm the facts? If he's dumb enough to lie about this, he'd be dead already.
The company commander sat, resting her chin on his fist, thinking, assuming the squad leader Enkrid is just lucky. What are the Aspen bastards planning? First, he needed to inform the battalion commander. That was the proper order. She finished her thoughts and stood up.
Where are you going?
Who chose this fool as the platoon leader? The company commander pushed the idiot aside and said,
I'm going to the battalion commander's tent.
Given these events, reporting was the top priority. Rem was bored. No minor skirmishes, nothing to do. Currently, both armies were busy glaring at each other from their respective positions. Rumors began circulating within the unit that the war might end just like this.
Well, that's how it is. Winter is coming soon and the battle on this plain isn't going to end abruptly, right? So they'll probably postpone it until next year.
That was Kreis with his sharp ears. It was more of a conclusion he reached by synthesizing the rumors rather than his own opinion. Rem didn't care what Kreis said or about these matters. Whether this battlefield repeated every year, or that Aspen and Norilia were once on good terms, what did it matter?
Nothing to do, damn it.
Sharpening his axe blade and juggling it to pass the time didn't change the fact that he had nothing to do. Rem was incredibly bored during this time. Everyone else seemed to have something to do.
Are you asking for that price for the cigars? Are you crazy? Did you get an arrowhead stuck in your head?
Over on one side, Big Eyes was busy selling things. After a battle, profits decrease for a while, so he was trying to earn as much as he could now. He was really living diligently.
What? Arrowhead?
Occasionally, there were guys who would glare at Big Eyes because of his small stature. Rem sometimes took it as a small hobby to intimidate those guys. Just licking the recently sharpened axe blade while staring at them would do the trick. In the first place, he never sharpened the axe blade too finely. If it was sharp enough to cut a finger upon contact, it would easily chip. Unless touched by magic or a craftsman's hand, this was the proper way to maintain it. So licking the axe blade wouldn't cut his tongue.
I did get hit by an arrow on my helmet in the last battle.
These guys would back off quickly.
Sigers are hard to come by, so how many do you need?
Kreis raised his voice again. He was every bit the merchant. The sneaky street cat-like Jackson was more often found outside wandering around than inside the tent. The religious nut was praying, looking incredibly depressed, with his head on the ground. He kept muttering,
God, give me an answer.
Seeing that, one would feel reluctant to approach him. Just watching him gave off a strong smell of a mad fanatic. Why the hell is that guy always like that? Lastly, there was Ragnar, who spent his time sleeping whenever he could. Wasn't he bored? He just spaced out all day, slept, spaced out, and slept again. Is that fun?
It's too boring without the squad leader around.
Rem silently grumbled to himself. He wondered if the squad leader had died. Scouting missions were dangerous, and although the squad leader had improved a lot, from Rem's perspective, his skills were still embarrassingly lacking. What if he was dead? He would be very disappointed.
Geez, have I grown attached to him?
From what he had observed so far, he was a person worth keeping alive. But following him around to protect him would be ridiculous. What was so special about that guy? Nothing. He was just a person he happened to like.
A person I like.
Come to think of it, such people were rare. How many people like that had there been in Rem's life? He hoped he would come back alive. But he wasn't anxious. He wasn't someone who would be easily defeated by amateurs. At the end of his various thoughts, Rem could no longer stand the lingering boredom. Whether the squad leader was dead or alive, he had to solve the current boredom.
Do I want to kill you?
Rem chose a straightforward method. He kicked the lounging Ragnar lightly and spoke. Ragnar stared up at Rem with a look that said,
What the hell is this guy doing now? Do you have a death wish?
Ragnar was serious.
I'm bored, let's have a fight.
No more words were needed. Jackson, who had briefly entered the tent, saw them and walked past, ignoring them. The religious nut was busy with his head on the ground, looking as depressed as usual. Kreis was absent. The two agreed and went outside. With a light clash of axe and sword, the fight began. They started swinging their weapons at each other. Rem's arm swung, and the axe came down with terrifying force. Ragnar twisted his body to avoid the axe blade and thrust his sword forward. The sharp thrust aimed at Rem's abdomen was far more refined than the countless stabs shown by squad leader Enkrid. Rem put all his strength into his toes and jumped back. A footprint was left where his foot had been. Anyone with a discerning eye would have been astonished by the level of skill displayed in their exchange. Squad leader Enkrid arrived just as the fight reached its peak.
"Kill him!"
One excited soldier shouted. By now, a crowd had gathered to watch the two of them. Why was the Troublemaker Squad known as the Troublemaker Squad? Because it was a collection of individuals with various issues. So why did the unit keep such a troublesome group? Because of their skills, of course. With the two of them showing off their skills, how could this not be a spectacle? As the sword and axe clashed, dust rose around them. Even so, they didn't take their eyes off each other. The axe blade seemed to drop from above, scraping the ground. Small stones flew as the axe blade scraped them. Ragnar avoided the axe slashing the ground and brought his sword down from above. The sword's trajectory was invisible even with eyes open. The sword, which was above, suddenly dropped to slash Rem's neck. The axe and sword clashed again. Sparks flew from the weapons they held. Crazy. The platoon leader of the 2nd Platoon, 4th Company, muttered to himself. It was obvious that their skill levels were several times higher than his own. Even a few soldiers who were confident in their abilities were astounded. Among them were those who were almost at the level of senior soldiers. They all felt the difference in skill level. Of course, there were also those who tried to gauge the abilities of the two fighters.
I could do that much too. If it were me, I would have finished it by now.
These thoughts were possible only because they mistakenly believed they were seeing everything the two had to offer. Meanwhile, Enkrid stood still, eyes wide open, oblivious to the surrounding chatter. At this moment, Enkrid's eyes were entirely focused on tracking their movements. His mind was fully occupied with countering their sword and axe. Sweat dripped from the tip of Enkrid's nose. Just watching and concentrating was enough to soak his entire body in sweat. Sometimes, just observing can improve one's skills. Though no one intended it, Enkrid realized what he needed to do at that moment.
This method won't work.
Everyone has their own way of learning, whether it's swordsmanship or physical training. Enkrid had something others didn't, the curse of a repeating day, the endlessly appearing walls the faceless ferryman spoke of. If that were the case, he needed a new method that suited him, not just ordinary training or practice. Watching their sword and axe, the method suddenly came to Enkrid's mind. Excitement and realization struck quickly and faded just as fast, like a pot of cold water being poured. Watching their sparring match, Enkrid had to admit it honestly. He had never drawn out such skills from either of them. Neither Rem nor Ragnar had ever shown such abilities when sparring with him. Beyond strength and speed, he could tell from their expressions. Rem was smiling. It looked so joyous. Ragnar's expression was also full of life. It was a face rarely seen from him. How many times had he repeated today? How many times had he narrowly escaped death? Even so, he couldn't seriously contend with either of them at the moment. That was his current position. But he wasn't discouraged. If he were the type to give up so easily, he wouldn't have started in the first place. Instead, he found it amusing. He now had a goal.
Those expressions.
Watching them, he resolved to make them show those expressions while fighting him. Enkrid found that deeply satisfying. He saw a new path ahead and had the time to walk it. He was immensely, truly immensely joyful. The axe and sword clashed, creating a strange sound. At the same time, Rem and Ragnar distanced themselves. Both were sweating heavily. Sweat was running down Ragnar's forehead. Rem exhaled and grinned.
Not bad for someone who just sleeps all the time.
Ragnar scoffed at that remark.
And where do you get off judging, you barbarian who only bullies the weak?
Despite the sharp words, they both lowered their weapons. They didn't need to speak to know each other's state. If they continued, they would have to fight to the death. While they might have done that if they were more excited, this wasn't the time. It was a sparring match with some energy left in reserve. While fighting, they noticed a familiar face among the onlookers. It was the squad leader. It was proof that they had the presence of mind to look around even during the fight.
Here to watch? If you're going to keep watching, why don't you join in?
As Rem spoke abruptly, the crowd of onlookers quickly dispersed. Among the dispersing crowd, only the scruffy-looking Enkrid remained.
You're back?
Rem greeted Enkrid. Ragna also acknowledged him with a glance. The fight was over, and Enkrid had returned safely. Soon Jackson came out, running his hand through his tousled red hair, and Kreis ran over when he saw the squad leader.
You're back, squad leader!
God has watched over you. Even the religious squad member acknowledged him. A total of 6, they were supposed to be a 10-member squad. Enkrid, now one of the 6, announced his return.
Is the scouting I know different from the scouting the squad leader knows?
Rem said, twirling the axe in his hand.
What do you mean?
It looks like you came back half dead.
A little scratch on the side, that's all.
If that's a scratch, would a cut kill you immediately?
Rem said and laughed. This guy hasn't changed at all. Well, how could he change in just a few days? For Enkrid, it's been months, but for them, it's only been less than a week.
I almost died.
Enkrid said, feeling the wound on his side. In reality, he had experienced death countless times, but he couldn't say that outright.
Let me see.
Jackson approached and examined the side wound. Enkrid turned his body and lifted his shirt to make it easier to see.
What do you know by looking?
Rem grumbled, but Jackson ignored him and inspected Enkrid's wound.
It's nothing,
Enkrid said.
The bone isn't damaged, but if you underestimate a minor wound, you'll suffer.
That was true.
I've applied ointment.
That's a relief.
Jackson nodded.
Did you encounter an enemy while scouting?
Big Eyes said, looking at Enkrid's shabby appearance. His hair was greasy, and he had dark circles under his eyes from not resting after the battle and continuing on foot. Throughout the mission, he barely washed, ate, or drank, so it was natural for him to look shabby.
Was it just an encounter? I stirred up the enemy camp.
He nodded slightly, not needing to explain everything. Having watched the battle between Rem and Ragna right after arriving, he was drenched in sweat and exhausted. So now,
Is there anything to eat? Water too.
it was time to eat and rest. To be honest, he wanted to swing his sword right away, but there were limits to what he could do in his current condition. Moreover, after seeing the enemy gathered in the tall grass, it didn't seem like this battle would end here. Therefore, since he would likely have to head back to the battlefield, he needed to get his body in shape.
Go wash up. We'll prepare a royal feast for you.
Rem said with a smile. Enkrid nodded and headed to a nearby stream. They didn't place the infantry camp here for no reason. The stream in the back made it easy to get drinking water and wash up. When he put his hand in the water, a chill quickly rose up.
It's getting cold.
It was the time of year when the temperature dropped. Enkrid washed his face roughly and took off his clothes to wash off the blood, oil, sweat, and dirt from his body.
That guy.
As he washed, memories of the recent events filled his mind. The tall grass, the ambush passing the flag, and finally the guy holding the sword and torch.
I feel like I'll see him again.
It was a premonition that they would meet in an unavoidable situation.
Is this the wall?
Hadn't the faceless ferryman said that the wall would endlessly block his path? He wasn't worried. If there was a wall, he would just have to climb over it. To be honest, he was rather looking forward to it. He regretted not having a showdown with that guy. Of course, if they fought, he would probably die. But he didn't want to avoid it. He wanted to fight him once. Seeing that guy stirred a strange competitive spirit in him. Sometimes, you meet someone like that. It's similar to falling in love at first sight, but instead, you want to fight and win against them. When he finished cleaning up and returned, there was warm soup, bread, and even roasted meat skewers that someone had managed to find. It couldn't be called a royal feast, but it was a rare treat in the midst battlefield. Rabbit? Enkrid asked, and Rem proudly stepped forward.
I personally prepared it.
No, it wasn't Rem, it was me who found it.
Jackson said, then Big Eyes glared.
Yeah, thanks.
Enkrid devoured the food as if it was the last meal on Earth.
Every time I see you eat, squad leader, you really have a hearty appetite.
One needs to eat well to gain strength.
You are the most unique person I've ever seen.
Rem, standing with his arms crossed, spouted nonsense while watching Enkrid eat. Here was a squad full of troublemakers, and among them he was being called unique by someone whose hobby was assaulting allies.
You're the last person I want to hear that from.
At this remark, Rem laughed again. After that, the squad members dispersed. Jackson said he had something to do and left. Kreis went out claiming it was time to do business. The religious squad member began praying in a corner while Rem idly spent time outside the tent, probably making silly jokes with passing soldiers. And Ragnar kept staring at Enkrid. He could feel the gaze.
What?
Annoyed by the persistent stare, Enkrid turned his head and asked.
Just looking.
Half lying down, Ragnar answered. When Enkrid tilted his head in confusion, Ragnar turned away, indicating it was nothing. It seemed like he had something to say, but Enkrid didn't press further. From leading this troublesome squad, he knew that asking now wouldn't get a response. In such cases, waiting often led to them bringing it up later. If nothing was said later, then it would just be let go. Since they had just returned from a mission, they were exempt from guard duty and meal duty. Enkrid ate well and slept soundly. Jackson's ointment was effective. The wound on his side healed quickly. At this rate, 2 days of rest should be sufficient. Even though Enkrid lay down to rest, he wasn't just idling away his time.
Even if I fight 10 times, I feel like I'll lose all 10.
Enkrid sat and repeatedly swung his sword in his mind. The first opponent was Rem, then Ragnar, and after that, the enemy he encountered in hostile territory. He pondered and pondered again. The old swordmaster who taught him in the quiet coastal town had said,
If you don't want to die by a blind blade, you have 2 options. One is to pray and pray again to the goddess of luck.
One was to rely on luck.
The second is to think and think endlessly.
If you survived a fight where you risked half your life, that fight would become your asset. It was something the old swordmaster of the coastal town often said, so how do you fight risking half your life and survive? Pondering, thinking, deliberation. He said to think of ways endlessly. If you faced an enemy without any thought, you would have to rely entirely on the first method at that time. He said if you didn't want that, you should always ponder.
He was a good teacher.
It was advice perfectly suited to Enkrid at that time, and that advice still shone now. Enkrid pondered and thought, how to win, at the very least how not to lose. The desperate struggle to find that method was Valen mercenary sword technique. That swordsmanship, which some called crude trickery, was also Enkrid's core skill. Feints, headbutts, the 3-sword style, quick draw techniques to throw daggers or stones. Though absurd and futile when actually experienced, it worked well against opponents encountering it for the first time, or those with mediocre skills. Enkrid in his mind swung his sword. He took a stabbing stance and threw a stone. Pretending to draw his sword, he threw a throwing knife. Rem deflected everything with his axe, and Ragnar dodged everything with agile footwork. The enemy with the sword and torch ignored the flying stone, charged and pierced Enkrid's heart with his sword. In reality, things might not move as he imagined, but at least in Enkrid's mental image they did.
Again.
He pondered endlessly. Enkrid spent the entire day this way and then fell asleep. When he did, he fell into a deep sleep as soon as his head hit the pillow. It was after a grueling mission. He was utterly exhausted. The next morning, Kreis brought breakfast. It was thin soup, salty dried jerky, and crumbly bread.
Is it your turn for duty? Yes, you slept really well, didn't you?
I was tired.
Kreis rolled his big eyes and asked,
What happened? Tell me!
Kreis, Big Eyes, was the information hub of the battlefield. Enkrid started to speak, but then paused to think. He decided there was no need to keep it a secret. It would be known soon enough, and it wasn't exactly classified information. Still, he couldn't go into too much detail, so he only mentioned that there was an enemy ambush in the tall grass. He didn't elaborate much, as he didn't have all the answers himself.
If they set up an ambush, they're not planning to just let it slide. But is there any point in making an ambush there?
Big Eyes sometimes hit the mark, despite knowing nothing about strategy.
There's no point.
If the scouting route hadn't been set through there, it would have been bypassed unnoticed. If Enkrid didn't have the ability to repeat the day, the scout team would have been wiped out. An ambush is a tactic to prepare for an attack. But the Allied forces weren't advancing towards the tall grass. Obviously, it was pointless. That's what Big Eyes meant.
We don't know yet.
We don't know. That was the correct answer. He assumed the higher-ups were planning something. There was definitely something going on. The flag, the guy guarding it. Even from the troop deployment, it felt like they were fully intent on annihilating any approaching enemies. Normally, troops wouldn't be deployed that way. So the conclusion was that the enemy was preparing something.
Sigh, I thought this would end here. Probably within the next day or two, we'll get orders,
Enkrid said. Not long after their idle talk, they heard someone shouting outside.
Move out. 4th Company, move out.
It was the voice of the 4th platoon leader.
You didn't hurt your leg, did you?
The one shouting outside poked his head into Enkrid's tent.
I heard you went through a lot.
Where did you hear that?
The rumors all over. They're saying you're the hidden child of the goddess of luck.
Since he had chalked up the recent events to luck, this reaction was expected.
Then who's my dad?
How should I know?
The platoon leader chuckled at Enkrid's joke.
You must be tired, but we're moving out. We're heading east from the camp, so let's get moving.
With that, Enkrid got up and dusted himself off. East meant towards the tall grass. Knowing about the ambush, they wouldn't enter the grass.
There's going to be a fight. The air feels different,
Rem said, suddenly appearing next to him.
Does it?
If you act up thinking your skills have improved, you'll end up dead. Be careful.
Was he worried or cursing him? Not only the 4th Company, but the entire infantry battalion was moving. So most of the infantry forces that were pulled out for this battle were moving. With each platoon roughly numbering 40 soldiers, it was around 600 infantrymen moving. With the sound of footsteps, the infantry battalion marched. There was no battle that day. After moving, they set up a makeshift camp again. They lit fires and each found their place. The commanders wouldn't give orders to charge into the tall grass unless they had arrows stuck in their heads, so it seemed like they were moving the troops here to prepare for any possible situations. After spending the day like that, the wound on Enkrid's side barely bothered him anymore. The next day, orders were given for each squad to prepare their own meals. The 6 squad members gathered and cooked stew in a single pot.
Caught a lizard on the way,
Jackson said, adding the drained lizard meat to the stew.
What's gotten into you to do something commendable?
Rem said, clearly pleased. Of course, Jackson didn't respond. Seeing this, Rem growled about being ignored again, but Jackson also ignored that. They weirdly get along, Enkrid thought. One side talking and the other ignoring seemed to fit together oddly well. In the army, moving, eating, and resting were work in themselves. Throughout the move and meals, Enkrid felt an odd gaze on him. Someone was staring at him. It was Ragna.
You're going to wear out your eyes,
Enkrid said casually, causing Ragna to look away.
It's nothing.
It was clear he had something to say. The atmosphere became tense as if a battle could break out at any moment, but another day passed without incident. In his spare time, Enkrid tried to practice the techniques he had envisioned. Some were easier than he thought, while others were harder. He spent the morning swinging his sword in a corner when Ragna approached and asked,
Why do you go to such lengths?
It was a question that came out of nowhere, but Enkrid understood perfectly. There were always a few people who couldn't express themselves well. Ragna wasn't one to have a way with words. He spoke in his own way, so the listener had to interpret well. In that sense, Enkrid was the right person. He could roughly understand what Ragna was trying to say. Enkrid scratched his forehead with his finger. The members of the Troublemaker squad each had strong personalities, but they shared one common trait. They were not particularly interested in their surroundings. Among them, Ragna was especially indifferent to the attention around him and didn't really care much.
Just eat enough, fight enough, and live enough.
He lived a very lax life and slept a lot. Knowing this about Ragna, Enkrid was secretly surprised when Ragna volunteered to replace him in the scout unit, that Ragna was stepping up to do the scouting. Has our lazy squad member changed? No, that wasn't the case. Ragna was whimsical and capricious. He might have been caught up in the mood at that moment, but he would have probably backed out in a day, or even half a day. That's why he wasn't sent in the first place. It wasn't for no reason that Enkrid ended up handling most of the troublesome tasks in the Troublemaker squad. In some ways, Ragna could be said to have a personality completely opposite to Enkrid's. He was generally unmotivated, while Enkrid was the type to split his time to swing his sword. Of course, Ragna sometimes wielded a sword too. As seen upon his return, he mingled with Rem and sometimes made a mark on the battlefield. Though each time Ragna would mutter, It wasn't intentional. Knowing this about Ragnar, Enkrid found it curious that Ragnar was showing interest in him.
What's the reason?
It was truly a rare occurrence. Sometimes he would ask questions or make requests, but he wasn't the type to observe closely for days and then ask questions persistently. Enkrid lowered the hand that had been scratching his forehead. Among the squad members, Rem was the most active, but even Rem only dealt with people within a certain boundary. It was evident when you looked closely. He was the type who didn't let people inside that boundary. In some ways, Rem could be considered more difficult to deal with than a lazy person like Ragnar. Still, Rem would say what needed to be said. Ragnar, on the other hand, rarely said even what was necessary. That's why Ragnar's question was so surprising. Enkrid stared into Ragnar's eyes for a moment. A silent pause passed between them. Enkrid stared intently as if in a staring contest, then soon looked up. He saw a cloudless sky. Despite the frequent recent rains, the sky was clear and blue, without a single cloud. It made him feel refreshed. Looking at the sky, all thoughts about why Ragnar was behaving this way, what his reasons for asking these questions were, and whether Enkrid's assumptions were correct, disappeared. Enkrid stopped worrying. He asked a question, so he answered. Whether dealing with a sword or with people, he always did his best.
Since when did I start worrying about such things?
Even when doing his best in everything, what he desired was always far away, so he lived a life of constant longing. Ragnar asked why he did it. He was probably referring to the way Enkrid would swing his sword whenever he had the chance. He was probably referring to his attitude of not taking anything lightly. He was probably asking about his determination not to give up despite his mediocre skills. So Enkrid answered the question with a question.
What if I were good with the sword?
Outside the makeshift camp, in a place without any shade, under the sunlight enveloping them both, Ragnar's gaze remained on Enkrid's face. Enkrid spoke again.
If I were good with it, what could I have become?
Enkrid's voice was smooth like a well-crafted instrument. At least that's how it sounded to Ragnar. It wasn't a voice heated with excitement, nor was it one filled with despair. It was calm and serene, like reading a storybook to a child.
Right now I swing my sword to survive, but that's not how I want to live.
With those words, Enkrid swung his sword from top to bottom vertically. The blade cut through the air, spreading its distinctive scent. The smell of iron mixed with the battlefield's aroma tickled Ragnar's nose. Enkrid continued what he was doing, whether Ragnar was beside him or not. He was practicing his swordsmanship from top to bottom. From bottom to top diagonally, then horizontally. Soon he was engaging with an imaginary opponent, performing binds, pulling the sword, and then executing a backhand strike. Ragnar watched the squad leader intently without saying a word, a soldier of the lowest rank in the kingdom of Naurilia. Ragnar knew that the squad leader's skills were not just at the lowest level. However, that didn't mean he could be considered a high-level swordsman or warrior. Even if he entered the mercenary field now, he would at best be slightly above average. A mid-level mercenary was not considered highly skilled. Having once been deeply involved in the mercenary world, Ragnar knew well the levels of mercenary skills. Regarding the sword, he had an innate insight as sharp as Frog's. He could assess the squad leader's skill and see his limitations.
It's already too late.
The start was wrong. He should have focused on the basics when he first held the sword. Lack of talent had robbed him of opportunities. What about the squad leader now? It was as he said. Desperate struggle to survive. The skills honed for that purpose were holding him back. There were only two things he had that were somewhat useful. One was what he had learned from the barbarian Rem, who, despite his bad luck, had decent skills. Then there was the sudden improvement in his thrusting technique. Aside from those two, he lacked the basics and always relied on unorthodox methods. That reliance on unorthodox methods was the problem. Ragnar fully utilized his insight, but instead of telling him, he asked about what was on his mind.
If you become good with the sword, what will you do then?
Enkrid stopped swinging his sword. Sweat beaded on his forehead, trickling down to his chin before falling to the ground. The sweat quickly seeped into the dirt beneath his feet. Sunlight, sword, wind, sky. With all of this in his heart, Enkrid spoke the dream he had repeated countless times.
A knight. I want to become a knight who charges to the end of the battlefield.
Why?
Ragnar asked back. To him, it was a natural question. Ragnar could see the path, a path where the destination was clear even without experiencing it. Would that path be enjoyable? If there's nothing specific to do or desire at the destination, there's no will to walk that path. That was Ragnar. He saw the path and the destination, but was a wanderer who didn't want to walk it, who couldn't walk it.
Do I need a reason to want to become one?
Enkrid asked in return. This is a romance, a longing. It's his life and the days he's lived through. It's also the dream of his younger days when he was captivated. How many times had he repeated his dream? There's no need for a reason to want something, but it's not just a fleeting desire.
I want to live according to what I believe is right. To draw my sword for the poor and sick, to draw my sword for honor, and to draw my sword for the ones I love.
What is a knight? Is it merely a well-trained killing machine? Often, knights were referred to as such. A combat weapon specialized in killing. But if the knight Enkrid dreamed of was merely that, he wouldn't have continued wielding his sword till now. A person who expresses his will through honor and faith, through the sword. A sword embodying chivalry that most people no longer seek. As Enkrid spoke, he thought of Krang. Why did Krang's words have such power? How did his words draw everyone in? Now, he felt he understood a little. It was because they were sincere and genuine. That was the foundation. So Enkrid spoke with all his heart. This came as a shock to Ragnar. Of course, Enkrid didn't know this because Ragnar didn't show it outwardly. Ragnar asked himself a question. He wanted to live according to what he believed was right, but why did he need a sword? Because without power, it's hard to realize what one believes in. There was always a void swirling in his chest. That was the source of his helplessness. But now, during his conversation with Enkrid, a different flame was igniting in his heart instead of that helplessness. With this flame starting to bloom in his heart, Ragnar fell into deep thought. He even sat down on the grass on one side of the plain. What is a knight and what is a sword? As these thoughts trailed off, he came to a conclusion.
I won't know unless I walk the path.
He found a reason to walk the path. Enkrid left him alone and continued to swing his sword. In the silence, only the sword, the sky, and the wind moved. Though some distance away, the noisy sounds of soldiers in the camp could be heard. But other than that, it was quiet. The silence didn't last long.
Do you want to learn the sword?
Ragnar, staring blankly at a pointed rock stuck in the ground, opened his mouth. With a thrust, sweat scattered into the air. Enkrid stopped in that position. He answered, his breath steady and his gaze fixed on the tip of his sword.
Yes.
It was a simple and calm response. If there was an opportunity to learn, he wouldn't miss it. For Enkrid, it was a given. Ragnar was surprised at what he said and at himself for saying it.
Why did I say that?
But soon he realized the reason. Half of it was the desire to show the desperate squad leader the right path. The other half was for himself.
If the squad leader is by my side,
he would unconsciously put in more effort. Seeing how Enkrid lived was stimulating. Ragnar needed stimulation, something to push him to walk the long and tedious path. The presence of the squad leader was that stimulation for him. With him around, he would train, however clumsily. The moment he saw the squad leader making progress, it brought a vitality he had never felt before. He had sparred with the squad leader, volunteered to go scouting, and even loosened up through REM. It was a rare occurrence, at least for Ragnar himself. So, what would happen if he taught the squad leader? It was more of a selfish act than an altruistic one, and Enkrid didn't worry about reasons.
Why is he doing this?
He hadn't asked for help, yet Ragnar offered to teach him the sword. When learning the heart of the beast, he had only managed it by pestering Rem. And when he learned from Jackson, all of it happened because he pushed himself first. But this time, it was different. After observing him for days, Ragnar suddenly approached, asked few questions, and offered to teach him the sword. It felt like a good opportunity, so he didn't want to question the reason. When sparring, Ragnar would remain silent about swordsmanship except for the necessary movements. Enkrid was like a hungry wolf when it came to the sword. During sparring, he asked countless questions and pushed further, but Ragnar evaded answering. And now, suddenly, he was offering to teach.
Then first of all,
Ragnar dusted off his pants as he stood up, chewing on his words as if carefully choosing them. Enkrid, with his sword tip pointed down, waited patiently. While waiting, Rem's words came to his mind.
I'm not really the one to teach you the sword.
Rem was skilled with both the axe and the sword. Enkrid had seen him slice and stab enemies with his sword multiple times.
I swing based purely on instinct, and that's not something you can teach. So it's better for the squad leader to learn more systematically.
It didn't seem like he didn't want to teach out of reluctance, or because he was stingy with his skills. If that were the case, he wouldn't have taught him the heart of the beast. At the time, Enkrid had simply accepted it and moved on. While Enkrid was lost in thought, Ragna spoke.
Something about the beast's heart or conscience that you learned from the barbarian.
The heart of the beast. How did that become the beast's innards? If Rem had heard that, he would have swung his axe immediately.
And the thrust.
Ragna continued, looking Enkrid straight in the eye.
Other than that, you need to rebuild from the beginning. Are you okay with that?
Enkrid tilted his head, momentarily not understanding.
So I'm saying you need to rebuild your basics. Can you do that?
Ragna knew no other way to teach or learn. Enkrid found it momentarily difficult to accept.
Why?
Valen mercenary sword technique. No matter what others said, he thought it was a great technique in swordsmanship.
If you keep using that mercenary swordsmanship, you won't be able to get any better than you are now.
Then Ragna continued to explain. His examples were crude, and his explanations were not clear, but Enkrid quickly understood. The core message was simple. His current state had clear limits. He could improve if he continued training as he was. But the progress would be slow, and he wouldn't be able to surpass his limits. When asked why, Ragna said it was because he had learned too many miscellaneous things.
The point is you lack the basics.
He didn't expect to hear such words. Even when he took silver or gold coins to find a training school, they always emphasized the importance of basics, so he had accepted it and invested quite a bit of time. In hindsight, it made sense to hear this now. He had always paid to learn. During that time, Enkrid couldn't focus on just the basics, so he had practiced what he thought were basic slashing and thrusting moves on his own. That was the problem. A brief realization dawned on him. Enkrid felt a sudden joy that shook his entire body. The hand holding his sword trembled. He saw a path. It was crude, but beyond the wall and darkness that always blocked his view, a path had opened. The joy of this moment was incomparable to any other emotion he had experienced in life. As his hand trembled, Ragna spoke in a cautious tone.
Now you have to choose. Will you start anew, or will you be satisfied with where you are?
Ragna thought Enkrid would give up. Starting anew meant rebuilding from the ground up. That would mean his current mid-upper level skills would drop to a lower level. Could he endure that? Someone who makes a living in the heart of the battlefield. Unless he had multiple lives, even if he wanted to, it wouldn't be easy. In the face of death, his body would naturally rely on the techniques it was familiar with.
You'll need to stake a few lives on this,
Ragna said, his tone rough, but filled with concern. Enkrid nodded. Ragna questioned with his eyes unclear about the meaning, so Enkrid continued.
I'll rebuild from scratch.
Really?
Ragna was surprised by the answer. There didn't seem to be a hint of hesitation in Enkrid's response. Even though just a moment ago his hands had been trembling, Ragna had thought it was out of anger, frustration, or despair. But Enkrid's reaction was the exact opposite.
Yes.
He was genuinely happy.